Okay, I want to talk to you in some detail about the auditory deficit. The reason is that 80% of the children that we help display an auditory deficit, and fixing that is by far the biggest task we have. The situation is that you can read in two ways. You're reading with your eyes if you're sighted, and that signal goes to your visual cortex, which is at the back of your brain, just around here. It then can go in two directions. Most of your visual information goes straight forward to your frontal lobe when you're navigating the world. That link is happening a lot. And so quite a lot of children, particularly ones with a strong visual facility and visual memory, will naturally use that very well worked path to recognize a word and remember it by sight. And in the early days of reading, when the number of words that a child can read is very limited, and that small vocabulary gets recycled around and around in all the materials, it is actually quite easy for a bright child to seem to do quite well with their reading by doing that. So they will recognize quite a lot of words. They will guess the others from the context. Usually there will be a big bright picture, dog with ball. The sentence says, the dog grabbed the and so a bright child will work out its ball, even if they haven't read the word ball before. So that strategy works for them quite well through the early years. However, as the text gets more complex and the link between the picture and the text becomes less clear, they will struggle more and more. You'll tend in particular to see them struggling with the short words. The long words are usually fairly clear from the context, but the short words are very interchangeable. And so you'll see wild guessing with just the first letter of the word on the page, perhaps being the same as the word they read out. And that is an absolutely clear sign of this auditory deficit, where they're just processing the text visually. The other symptom you'll see is a lot of flipping. It's very interesting that when they are processing the text symmetrically, and that's what happens when it goes from the visual cortex straight forward in both hemispheres to the frontal cortex, you get this flipping thing. Now, once we begin to re-engineer their reading and engage their auditory cortex, which is usually on the left-hand side of the brain, you get this asymmetry to the whole thing. And interestingly, that flipping seems to go away. It gives directional stability to the processing of the text for the child. So that is what we're doing. Your auditory cortex is sort of just in from your left ear, really, on the left-hand side of your brain. So what we want is a neuronal link from the visual cortex to go to the auditory cortex, where the text is mapped for the letter patterns to sounds. And it's a rather beautiful thing. It's something which the brain is very good at, is mapping relationships. And there are lots of examples of that. And this is one of them, that the brain is able to become familiar with letter patterns and map those to sounds. Now, in some languages that's very easy because you have a one-to-one relationship between letter pattern and sound. German is a good example of that. Spanish is probably the best of the European languages, has an almost direct linkage there. French is not so good, but far better than English. English is a disaster in this sense because we have 26 letters, we have around about 70 different sounds that we use, and we can represent those 70 sounds in over 200 letter patterns. And what that means is that for each sound you've got 3 possible different letter patterns, and also each letter pattern can be offering more than one sound. So there's just a complexity there which is very difficult to deal with. And that's why sometimes people have just said, well, visual reading is the easiest solution. The evidence is that that's not the case, because the children who hit this reading plateau are the visual readers. In order to master reading, then it is crucial to use the auditory cortex. However, that doesn't mean to say that it's an easy process to learn, but it's essential. So what we do is we get the auditory cortex engaged, and magically the brain can deal with this complexity. We all make mistakes, especially with new words in English. Some words, you look at them and you just don't know how they're going to be pronounced. And I still find that in my mid-40s. Somebody with a fantastic classical education, certainly a better one than mine, might be able to work it out from the roots, but most of us don't live with that, and so we can be confused. But having said that, once the skill is developed, the brain has this magical ability to link these letter patterns to sounds and then blend the sounds into the words, and the whole thing then flows through your auditory cortex and then your linguistic cortex, just as if you were being spoken to. And you have two areas in your linguistic cortex. One is called Wernicke's area, which is to do with comprehension of text, and another is called Broca's area, which is for the production of speech and writing. Now, the visual, you will get some visual readers, for instance, and this is sort of rather extraordinary, who can read, they can read out text quite fluently, but if you ask them what the text has meant, they won't have a clue. However, if you read the text to them, then they can understand it absolutely fine. And this is explained by these two different areas in the linguistic cortex. When they're reading out, the signal is going to their visual cortex, going straight forward to their frontal lobe here, and then it's going over to this Broca's area, sort of by their left eyebrow, which is what produces text for speech for them. So there they are, they're processing the whole thing, they're producing the speech, apparently reading, and yet Wernicke's area, which is about comprehension, is not engaged, and therefore they can't follow the meaning. Sometimes it's called word blindness, that they, where somebody can read stuff out without following the meaning. So as soon as we engage the auditory cortex and then follow the path through Wernicke's area and then Broca's area if you're reading out loud, this goes away. Comprehension follows, and the whole thing becomes a lot easier. Now, it's important to note that some people, some very advanced readers, switch back to a purely visual process for sort of scan reading. Lawyers and academics are particularly strong at this. They have huge amounts to read, and they will flick through text, maybe a page a second or something like that, and they're just scanning it visually to pick up a gist of meaning. However, that is not the same as reading the text. When they need to read some text in detail, they will slow right down and read conventionally using the auditory channel. So there is absolutely no question in my mind, and you will hear debate about this, but we've worked with a lot of children who have run into difficulties. We teach them to use their auditory cortex. The vast majority can do that. If they've not got any apparent auditory difficulty, if they can speak quite clearly, if their hearing is okay, there's no reason to think that their auditory cortex isn't working fine, then once we re-engineer the link from the visual to the auditory, the whole thing usually drops into place. So that's what we do, and that is the key to 80% of reading difficulty, and therefore is very likely to be what will help your child if your child is struggling with reading at the moment. Thank you.